Thanks for staying with us. It's Tuesday, so we have to discuss something about health. Today is World Malaria Day. It is a day set aside to raise awareness of the global efforts to control and ultimately eradicate malaria. Join us on the show to discuss the consultant family physician and head of family medicine department, Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, Ikeja, Dr. Sodipo Oluwajimi. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Yes.
Well, since it's World Malaria Day, the very first question all of Nigerians are asking is this new vaccine?
Yes.
Everybody's talking about the new vaccine. Ghana has started using it as approved for children 3 and below. NAFDAC just said we should go ahead. Please tell us about this vaccine. I mean, you know how Nigerians are. We're always scared of new things. Is it for real?
Okay. Well, thank you. I knew that was probably going to be the first question. And yeah, so the vaccine is made by Oxford University. And actually, it's the second vaccine that is being made for malaria. The first one being one that was made by the World Health Organization sometime 2021. And the hope is that with the vaccine, we're able to target the vulnerable groups of people that have severe malaria, children initially, then probably building on to adults, especially those with vulnerabilities, maybe those with sickle cell, pregnancy. But for now, it's just for children. And the aim is that it would help to prevent the cases of severe malaria and even what we call simple malaria. Severe because there are some features that could affect and lead to death, and simple, you know, the person is just ill. So the vaccine is out. I mean, there are some positives, which is that, number one, Nigeria and Ghana are keen in. And yeah, it's good that we're one of the first people for once to really keen to such a vaccine. Of course, there are still questions because the World Health Organization did not sanction this vaccine, or has not yet sanctioned the vaccine. But looking through the literature from from NAFDAC, a technical team was set up, scientific team. I think we're getting about 100,000 doses. They're going to start using it in children. Of course, with everything with vaccines, there's going to be surveillance. Okay. And I know most of us are vaccine hesitant. I can see a lot of concerns already. Yes, but I mean, it's something that could help us if proven to be very successful.
So let me tell you where the hesitation is coming from. When you said it's not the one sanctioned by World Health Organization, you were like, why did Nigeria not go with the one sanctioned and be validated by WHO? Yes, yeah. Do we know the parameters that they use in picking this particular one?
Okay, so the challenge that came up with the one sanctioned by WHO was the fact that it wasn't too efficacious. And of course, there are cost-benefit issues. But the major reason was that it just reduced mortality by, I think, about 30%. So the question was, if you're going to launch such a vaccine, is it really worth the cost? Yes, and cost. So with the Oxford one, I mean, that concern is there. I was still listening to an expert on Al Jazeera just the other day, where in Ghana, too, there were some questions that were being asked that, you know, why has the World Health Organization not come on board? But we know sometimes with the validation process with WHO, it takes some time. Like if you notice what happened with COVID, there were initially some vaccines, then some others that came in from China, India took some time before they were validated. But I think the good news is that it could push us to start becoming more vaccine reliant as a country. You know, we need to realize that vaccines are important. But I mean, I'm not going to sit down here and say we shouldn't put in place all safety nets to ensure that, especially since we're dealing with children, you know, you don't want complications to arise, because when those complications arise, you now have more vaccine hesitancy, you know, like what happened some years ago in Kano with the meningitis vaccine and things like that. So, I mean, I want to trust NAFDAC that they are doing what they should, due diligence, technical team on board, and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure there's a lot of surveillance going on. And
which children are they going to?
The question just, in fact, you took it out of my mouth, because I would not quickly take the vaccine. I would wait. You know, we are presently dealing with some conditions we are seeing are blamed on vaccines. I read about one vaccine in the US 34 years after people suing the originators of the vaccines and all of that. Yeah. I don't want to live in 34 years and wonder what will happen to my kids. So what exactly are the guarantees that you would get as a parent to calm you down? Because the truth is, malaria, Africans in the tropics and where we live, Waiting they fear us exactly. You know, our ancestors.
Die.
I'm not saying that people didn't, but we.
No, still are, actually.
Still dying.
Children.
But we are doing people. The percentage of people doing well in these areas where we live. I beg you can differ.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, is something that shouldn't so much scare us. Where this vaccine was originally created is not even the person who made the vaccine didn't come from here. Yeah. So what exactly do we fear? Have we not been able over time to improve on that? And and how exactly are we going to just pick the kids that would be the test for this? Or is Africa a test ground for the world?
Well, I think I'll start first with the issue of the burden of malaria. Yeah, all of us have had malaria. I don't think anybody here hasn't had episodes. But we mustn't forget that malaria is still one of the biggest causes of death in Nigeria. Yeah. We still have about 600,000 people dying from malaria worldwide. And Nigeria contributes about 30% of that population. So you're looking at about 100, 200,000 children that are dying from malaria. So it's still a very big
Can I just read the
problem.
UNICEF data just
please.
for information? They say nearly every minute, this is for Africa, nearly every minute a child under 5 dies of malaria. Many of these deaths are preventable and treatable, as we know. In 2021, there were 247 million malaria cases and 619,000 deaths. In Africa, 77% were children under 5.
And
So we
Nigeria
now know
contributed about 30% of that.
number.
So it's actually still a large number. And then we are not even looking at some of the complications. Some people develop kidney injury from that. Some people develop cerebral malaria. They go into a coma. Some people have liver problems. So malaria is actually still a very big problem. But yes, coming to the question of what are going to be the safety guards, before every vaccine is used, there are safety protocols, there are inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. We've not gotten all the information on that, but one thing that we can all be rest assured of is that before any vaccine is administered, there would be all those safety protocols in place, and there will also be administration safety protocols. One problem that is even coming up in America is something known as vaccine hesitancy. And it started becoming more serious because of the issue of people having autism and things. And people said, is it due to MMR vaccine and co? But a lot of studies have still shown that vaccines are actually safe, and I'm sure we'll do a lot with that.
Let's go on a break. When we come back, we still discuss malaria. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. We still have our doctor with us. Toko was going to ask a question.
Yeah, so discussing about malaria is something that I feel like we should have gotten over it, because we've had it for so many years and we've discussed it every time, and we're still recording the highest number of deaths in Africa concerning malaria. What are the things that you feel we're missing out on that is still letting us still have statistics like this, reflecting death?
Well, I think it's a we need a multi-pronged approach because the problem has so many facets to it. But I think if we key into the theme of this year's World Malaria Day, which is, invest, innovate, and implement, we'll be able to tackle some of them. So I think the two major areas that we need to really look at are, one, environmental. Malaria is spread by the Anopheles mosquito, and once you have that mosquito, there's always going to be the risk of spreading Plasmodium, which causes malaria. And what we've seen is that some countries have been successful to be able to eradicate malaria. Currently, we have about 100 countries that have been certified as being malaria-free, and about 2 to 3 of them are in Africa. So we need a lot of investment in terms of environmental controls, and I think that's one area. For example, we've seen a lot of flooding coming up, so those are all risk factors for allowing the mosquito to grow. We also have a lot of environmental issues, grass and things like that, so there needs to be a lot of investment there. Secondly, we also need to invest in terms of, the mosquitoes are becoming resistant to some of the protective mechanisms we have, like our insecticide-treated nets, our insecticides themselves. And recently there was an article that showed that normally we have a type of mosquito here known as Anopheles gambia, but a recent study showed that we are having importation of a different type of mosquito, which is Anopheles stevens, which, somehow you spray it and it just seems to be looking at you and saying, what's going on? There's nothing. So we really need to intensify, and then we need to use some protective mechanisms. Insecticide-treated nets. Many of us, I don't know how many of us use insecticide-treated nets in our houses. Because of light, people always complain, oh, I feel hot, I can't sleep under it. But most times that may not actually be the case. I think it's just a perception. Once you have a fan, you know, so especially for the children, it will protect them. And then even, you know, for things like our doors and windows, do we actually have nets there? So those are all areas that need to be looked into. And then the problem of treatment. You know, once somebody has a headache, some flu-like symptoms, chest pain, we buy malaria medicine. That is driving resistance and
self-diagnosis.
Yes, everybody is, you know, has malaria or typhoid.
Malaria.
Yeah, so,
Doctor, beg,
yes.
please.
So
Which one is +1, +2, +3?
Yes.
Because during this Ramadan, I got treated.
Okay.
+1, +1. +1, +1 every time. So I am one who doesn't do self-medication for myself or my kids. I go to the hospital. But when they are saying +1, +1, I have to cook the AGBO, join it and intensify treatment.
Well, you've spoken on an area that I think I'll come to, that issue of AGBO. But I'll start with the 1+ or 2+. Normally, that just gives an idea of the number of parasites, yes, that are there. So when it's 1+, we're looking at about 1 to 10 parasites per 100 when they look at it under the microscope. But again, some of the challenges that are coming up are ideally people should be trained to really identify that what you're calling, you know, the plasmodium in the red blood cell is actually plasmodium. So you could go to one lab, they say 1+, another lab says 2+ and 3+. So that's why the issue of training for people that do this test is very important. And the World Health Organization has been promoting the use of rapid diagnostic test kits, you know, where, you know, the same way we do our pregnancy test.
Yeah, that's what they do most of now.
Yes, but again, some people have raised some challenge that you may not pick cases that are not so severe, but it's still better than just picking up a medication and using that medication. And just before I end this point, the issue of AGBO, you know, yes, I know people say when you say a doctor, the first thing they look at you when you talk about AGBO is, no, don't use AGBO. But again, I think one problem we are saying is, you know, people look at malaria as a mild illness. What is there in malaria? But a lot of people who develop renal problems and others, and when maybe somebody was even doing well, they took the anti-malaria, they were getting better. Suddenly, one very nice auntie, uncle, or somebody comes in, or friend,
put you inside
says,
the heat.
why not take AGBO, IBA? It could
AGBO.
now cause some, you know, worsen the situation and affect the kidney. So I know that's not the topic for today, but
No, it is
I
part of
will-
the
It's
topic.
important.
Yes.
Yeah, because I really wanted to.
Let me tell you, so I think it makes sense. Because at the end of the day, the kidney cannot process it, right?
Yes.
And then it affects it. So we are drinking
Depends
the
on
AGBO.
what
I think it's
AGBO contains.
prescription.
Fruits that we are using for our AGBO. It's fruit and back of fruit.
No, no,
Pineapple back.
So
Orange back.
here's the concern. You've mentioned malaria and this complication with kidney. Is the complication, is malaria leading to kidney complications based on AGBO or based on regular lack of proper treatment of the malaria? What exactly makes malaria lead to complications in kidney?
Okay, so first, malaria can cause kidney problems because when there's a high number of parasites, it affects the blood and causes anemia. That also affects, because once the blood level is low, the kidneys become affected. So that could be there. And a lot of studies have shown that people that have malaria, one of the complications they tend to have is anemia, which is low blood level. Most times we don't check. People just do their malaria test and move on. But if there are some newer machines that check for both malaria and also check for the blood level, what we call the PCV. Yeah, so that is already there. So let's look at a scenario where the person already had some low blood level from treatment of malaria and was even getting better. The person now decided to take some AGBO. And usually I always focus more on the root-based AGBOs, all these bark of a tree, those ones that they, Dogonyaro and all the years. So the person now decides to take that. Remember that the person would probably have recovered, kidneys already trying to get over, okay, well, I'm getting better. They now get a direct insult, which is from the AGBO. And if the person is now unfortunate that, you know, the person just said, yes, that take more, you know. Sometimes you just, like the other day I was trying to buy fuel and I just sat down. The guy that was selling fuel for me just said, please give me a minute. He went to the lady that was selling AGBO and took a shot, you know. They just mix. So I tried to interact with him that, okay, how do you know the one to even take? I mean, how do you said, no, the woman knows. I said, okay. I mean, does the woman know anything about you as a person and things like that? So I think we need to, you know, take it very, very seriously. I mean, we're not saying you can't, there's what we call complementary, there's what we call alternative. For example, I'm taking fruits, I'm taking garlic, I'm taking, yes, those are all complementary. Even if I have high blood pressure, I'm treating malaria, it's not going to really affect that. But when somebody now goes directly, especially the root base, those ones that have the bark of the tree, a lot of studies are showing either from environmental contamination, dosing issues, or from just taking something that was not properly prepared, it's driving up a lot of the
I agree with
complications.
you.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Hallelujah.
To an extent.
So,
If we
I
come
see
here,
those mixtures that they buy
Yes.
on the road.
Yeah.
That is not the AGBO I grew up with.
Okay.
And I have seen where somebody has been treated over time in the hospital, and the dogoyaro combination of fruits and all of that boiled in the house with omiogi, what they call me do, is what cured the person. What I explained it as a young person was, you're doing a lot of fluid and helping yourself because you'll be going to, flushing out.
you're not a doctor.
No, I'm not talking as a doctor now. I'm just explaining that what I would never do is I once saw the mixture and somebody pouring, there was this content in a bottle from China that had eucalyptus oil and all of that, and they were pouring it in AGBO. So I don't even support the buying. But you can sit in your house and make a good pot, which I did during COVID, and I got better. So before we go cancel everything.
No, I mean, as I said, we support it. But again, I think another thing I need to bring out here is we need to be sure a lot of times that we're dealing with malaria. You know, most times, and that's where WHO now has been really focusing on. Somebody could, just have recurrent bouts of fever, and the next thing, I have malaria, I have typhoid. I mean, that's the diagnosis that everybody gets. But we've seen that a lot of cases may be due to other things, that are not that. So it's always important that, once you've treated malaria once, twice, and you're still not getting better, we need to really do more tests.
That was my question, because many people treat malaria
10 times, 20
in a
times.
year.
Yes.
And I was wondering, at what point should your doctor say, you know what, we have treated this long enough, let's try something else? We have people complain that they'll go to their doctors often and the doctors keep giving them malaria treatment. At what point is the doctor supposed to say, you've treated this for 5 times this year? Maybe we should look at something else. Or if the doctor doesn't suggest it as a patient, what do I say to the doctor?
Yeah, so I think we need to look at it individually. We know that malaria is commoner in children and those that are older, the elderly. So if they're having recurrent bouts, then we need to look at environmental factors. Are they sleeping under the net? Are they taking the right dosing? But of course, ensuring that we do tests. But once a person has treated malaria once, twice, especially when it's an adult and is still having symptoms, because the malaria symptoms are commonly a headache, some fever, some general feeling of being unwell. The other person needs to do further tests. One thing that causes a lot of such symptoms are viral infections. We don't commonly test for that here because most times they run themselves out. But if you can remember what happened with COVID actually started with somebody just having some cold, some fatigue. It was when people started developing respiratory distress that people said, this may not actually be malaria, this may actually be something else. So I think anybody that's treated malaria more than twice should have further evaluation, especially if they are among the vulnerable population. The person has some chronic medical illness, diabetes is one. It's a very big problem. People have hypertension, people have other end organ issues, people have sickle cell anemia. Yeah, so if somebody has sickle cell anemia, they're prone to having some challenges with malaria. People that are coming in from outside the country, either they've lived there for a very long time or they were born there, they are prone to that, amongst others. Yes.
Yes, I want. Is it question or advice rather? Because I feel that one group of people that complicates our process of eradicating malaria are chemists, not pharmacists, but chemists. Yeah. And the medical doctors and the medical organizations need to put a lot of pressure on our pharmacies and chemists, more importantly, to stop just giving, dispensing drugs and advising that people go back home and sort of get rid of. Because we've not had malaria in our house in a very, very long time, and it's because we have reduced the things that could get mosquitoes into the house. So that if that advice comes ahead, it might reduce us getting resistance to malaria. How do you sensitize those people that have chemists to prevent them?
So yes, you've mentioned a very big problem, and I think there needs to be intersectoral collaboration. The most important thing is that we need to ensure that people can easily get tested, you know, and maybe that's where the rapid diagnostic test kits come in. And ideally, well, it's difficult to say it should be a prescription medication because, again, you're dealing with shortage of healthcare workers, how do people get drugs? And so, you know, recently I think the government launched the Nigeria Malaria Control Program, and I think they could help alongside with the Federal Ministry of Health to come up with protocols. Already there are some guidelines that advise do this, but all of them advise on one thing: ensure the person gets tested before treatment. Do you do a microscopy test? Is one option if you have all the skills. Do you just do a rapid diagnostic test kit? That's the second one. So I think that's one area that we could look at.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oluwajimi. I think it was a pleasure having you. Thank you for. It's always good every year to remind ourselves the importance of malaria. Hasn't been eradicated. We still have lots of children dying. Over 200,000, you said? Yeah. Over 600,000 children die in Africa. So it's really an issue that we continue to discuss. We're happy about the vaccine. We're thankful that NAFDAC has reviewed it and said it is authorized for us to use. Yeah. We're waiting to see the first 100,000 usage and then review, and then we'll see how that goes. But we're really, really optimistic that it's going to work because hopefully when that happens, malaria then will be eventually be taken care of for us.